Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarsOfTheGames.com Modern Open in Orlando, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside Andrew Tenjum of Team Card Order. How you doing?
Good.
Now, it's good to see you here. You've already qualified for the Players' Championship.
Yep, I did in Season 1.
But you and the rest of the team are here battling, and you're playing a green-blue Eldrazi deck. Bant is kind of the flavor of the week right now. You know, we've seen it at the World Championships. We've seen it all over the place, kind of starting to take off. But
absolutely.
You guys, and you in particular, were on the Eldrazi train very early. You know, back when Eye of Ugin was allowed. You guys kind of looked at the Pro Tour, had seen colorless, and the blue-red builds had taken off, and you immediately kind of brought the blue-white build to the forefront, which just kind of dominated the format for the remainder of Eye of Ugin's legality.
Correct. Yep.
Well, have you done it again?
I don't know if we did it again. This deck is not nearly as broken without Eye of Ugin, but I think this deck does a lot of powerful things that the Bant Eldrazi deck cannot do. So I'm really excited to play it this weekend.
Right. So of course the Bant Eldrazi decks have access to white, which allows them to use things like Displacer, Path to Exile, and then some sideboard cards.
Correct.
You kind of cutting white, mainly need to focus on these new cards from Eldritch Moon, from blue, Elder Deep Fiend, and of course Lashweed Lurker. And I think the Deep Fiend is the real call to this, right?
Correct. The Deep Fiend is the big payoff card. Yeah, we were just talking about shells for Elder Deep Fiend in Modern because I think the card is incredibly underplayed. Well, seeing as how it wasn't played at all. But there are a lot of enablers in Modern that aren't necessarily legal in other formats, which makes Elder Deep Fiend very powerful if you can emerge it early in the game. And we can do that with mana acceleration in this deck between the Birds of Paradise Noble Hierarchs and Eldrazi Temples. There are a lot of sequences in this deck where we can power out an Elder Deep Fiend or a Lashweed Lurker as early as turn 3. Whether that means Noble Hierarch into one of our 3-drops, which include Matter Reshaper, Kitchen Finks, and Sky Spawner, into a turn 3 Elder Deep Fiend or Lashweed Lurker. And that's really hard for a lot of decks to come back from because you're so far ahead in tempo as early as turn 3 in the game.
Right. So instead of kind of playing small ball, you're just looking to get to the board immediately with something like Deep Fiend, lock them down, and then just have a ton of power after that. Because of course you have the heavy hitters of Reality Smasher and Thought-Knot Seer along in the shell as well.
Exactly. An early Elder Deep Fiend followed up by something like a Reality Smasher is just incredibly powerful. And we can even search out the Reality Smasher after we cast the Deep Fiend by using Sanctum of Ugin. So we can just sacrifice the Sanctum of Ugin and search for, depending on the board state, another Elder Deep Fiend or maybe a Reality Smasher or a Lashweed Lurker. One of the more powerful sequences in the deck is a turn 1 Mana Dude, followed by a turn 2 Kitchen Finks. And then on turn 3, if we have a Sanctum of Ugin and an Elder Deep Fiend, we can cast the Deep Fiend, tapping down all their permanents, sacking the Sanctum of Ugin, searching for another Deep Fiend, and then since we still have the Kitchen Finks lying around from its Persist trigger, we can do the same thing next turn. So we're essentially time-walking them for 2 turns and getting 10 power on the board.
That's
which is
a
incredibly
pretty big
powerful.
game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, so of course you have Ancient Stirrings here, kind of this just great card that we see in both builds. Let you find basically everything you're looking for. And Dismember is basically your only removal now, because you no longer have access to Path, but you also have Lashweed Lurker, which kind of works as semi-removal as well.
Exactly, yeah. We don't have access to Path to Exile, but we do have a couple Dismembers just because we need some amount of removal. But also the Lashweed Lurker and Elder Deep Fiend kind of act as removal in a way. The Lashweed Lurker because it can bounce any of our opponent's creatures that are problematic. And then Elder Deep Fiend can obviously tap them down, which is essentially the same thing as removing them if we're just going to be attacking them and hopefully getting them dead.
Right, this deck looks a lot more streamlined, like you know exactly what you want to do every game, whereas like the Bant deck, you know, they have things like Drowner and Displacer and are kind of looking for this longer game. You've done away with that.
Exactly, yeah. Drowner and Displacer are really powerful in the more fair matchups, but I really like Elder Deep Fiend and Lashweed Lurker better in the more unfair matchups because they close out the game faster, and Elder Deep Fiend's trigger actually stops our opponent from doing unfair things because we're tapping down all their lands and basically not allowing them to cast spells.
Right, so instead of trying to use all these reactive spells, you're just tapping down all their mana or all the resources and not allowing these unfair decks to beat you at the speed in which they try to do that.
Exactly. I think the Bant Eldrazi deck is a little confused sometimes as to whether it's an aggressive deck or a control deck. But this deck it's always aggressive or tempo-y all the time.
Sure.
There's not really a control plan B.
Right, and I think the key here is, the Sanctum, which just allows you to do so many crazy things in this deck. You already mentioned, chaining the Deep Fiends or just Deep Fiending into a Reality Smasher. All of a sudden you have 10 power in play. The game's going to be over very quickly.
Exactly. Sanctum of Ugin really ties the room together, just because chaining the emerge creatures is just so powerful, and it allows us to get a bunch of power in play. And we don't even necessarily have to sack it if we're short on mana. So it also gives us like a mana sink in a way. So it prevents us from flooding out because it's a land that if we have enough lands already, it acts as a spell by searching out another one of our powerful spells.
Right. Also getting to play Kitchen Finks is a pretty big game against a lot of the decks. They're just trying to kill you really quickly with damage. Obviously not infect. Plus just the value you get off your emerge creatures.
Yeah, the persist on Kitchen Finks is obviously very powerful with Emerge, but it's also very good incidental hate against Burn. It's really nice getting paired against Burn when I have a deck with 4 main deck Kitchen Finks. I've played Abzan Company in the past a lot, and it's just really nice because it feels so easy to win when you're playing Kitchen Finks as early, even as early as turn 2 off our mana dorks.
Okay. Let's talk about the sideboard, because a lot of the strength in the Bant deck is the sideboard and kind of the crazy powerful cards they can play. And, we got to mention that most of your teammates are on the Bant build,
yes,
but you're kind of diverting to try to play your own build here. So
exactly,
we got 3 Stubborn Denials and then a bunch of 2-ofs. Stubborn Denial obviously great when you need a hard counter because your deck can generate so many big creatures.
And I think it's even better in this deck than Bant Eldrazi because we're more aggressive, we're able to counter the relevant spell that they have to either stop us or kill us, and then we can close out the game very quickly, whereas Bant takes a little longer to close out the game with slower creatures like Drowner of Hope and Eldrazi Displacer.
Sure. Now your artifact suite here, you got a bunch of graveyard hate between Relic and Grafdigger's Cage. Then you have Engineered Explosives. This is probably like the card coming into the tournament that everyone was just scrambling for.
Oh yeah,
no one could find copies of it.
I was looking at my Facebook feed. Everyone is just asking for Engineered Explosives. I'm guessing for Bant Eldrazi, but it also can go in essentially any deck. But yeah, the artifacts hate cards are really nice because you can find them off Ancient Stirrings. So it kind of makes them. They're all 2-ofs in my sideboard, but it kind of feels like I have 3 or 4 copies once you factor in the Ancient Stirrings that can find more copies of them.
And what's this card really great against right now? It's Engineered Explosives.
That's the thing about Engineered Explosives. It's not really great against anything per se, but it's just a very solid card in a ton of matchups. I would say it's at its best against a deck like Infect, maybe Bogles if that's a deck.
Right.
But yeah,
Death Shadow,
Death Shadow is very good against as well. It's just a very versatile card that can answer any problematic permanents while also being searchable in a way with our Ancient Stirrings.
Okay, other cards, you got Hurkyl's Recall, seems great against Affinity, and of course Gut Shot. That's taking care of Infect and Affinity creatures.
Yeah, and then also comes in against decks like Abzan Company. There's a lot of decks in Modern that rely on 1 toughness creatures, and Gut Shot being able to be cast for 0 mana is just great.
Okay, well I think this deck looks great. I mean, we haven't seen anyone really take Elder Deep Fiend into Modern quite yet. This looks really good. We hope to have you on camera. You're 3-0 so far.
Yep,
Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Deck Tech. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Orlando.